The Galactic Council chambers buzzed with nervous energy as Admiral of the Empire slammed his four-clawed fist against the polished metal table. His serpentine neck coiled with frustration as he addressed the assembled representatives of 37 different species. "This cannot continue," his voice hissed through the universal translator. "The humans have gone too far this time. They destroyed an entire battle group with a single vessel." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Hive Queen clicked her mandibles in skepticism. "Impossible. Our intelligence reports indicate human vessels are primitive at best. Chemical propulsion, kinetic weapons, crude energy shields." "That's what we all believed," Admiral replied, his yellow eyes gleaming with a mixture of fear and rage. "Until 3 solar cycles ago when the cargo vessel Twilight's Edge encountered what the humans call the Indomitable." The lights dimmed as a holographic display materialized above the conference table. Grainy footage showed a massive human vessel, its hull a patchwork of different metals and technologies. Unlike the sleek, organic curves of most galactic ships, this one looked like it had been assembled from spare parts and sheer determination. "At first glance, it appears to be nothing more than a converted mining ship," continued the Admiral. "But watch what happens next." The footage showed 3 destroyers approaching the human vessel. Standard protocol for dealing with primitive species involved a show of force followed by surrender demands. The lead destroyer launched a warning shot across the human ship's bow. What happened next, all conventional understanding of space warfare. The human vessel didn't retreat or surrender. Instead, it accelerated directly toward the formation. Energy readings spiked across the display as the Indomitable opened fire with weapons that shouldn't have existed on a primitive vessel. The first destroyer simply vanished in a brilliant flash of light. The second managed to raise shields before being torn apart by some kind of projectile weapon that punched through advanced armor like it was paper. The third destroyer attempted to flee, but whatever the humans were using for propulsion allowed them to close the distance in seconds. The footage ended with the Indomitable moving away from a debris field that had once been 3 of the Empire's finest warships. "This cannot be real," whispered Ambassador of the Federation. Her crystalline form shimmered with disbelief. "Our scientists have studied human technology for decades. They barely achieved faster-than-light travel 50 of their years ago." "I thought the same thing," Admiral replied grimly. "So I ordered a full investigation. What we discovered changes everything we thought we knew about humanity." The hologram shifted to show Captain standing on the bridge of the Indomitable. He was unremarkable by human standards, average height, graying hair, wearing a simple uniform that looked like it had been patched multiple times. But his eyes held something that made even the most hardened galactic warriors uncomfortable: absolute determination. "Captain was once a cargo hauler," the Admiral explained. "He spent decades moving goods between human colonies on the frontier. When the hegemony started pressuring human settlements, demanding tribute and threatening civilians, something changed in him." The assembled delegates knew about the hegemony's expansion into human space. It was considered a minor territorial dispute, hardly worth the Council's attention. Humans were seen as a curiosity, a species that had achieved despite their primitive technology and aggressive nature. "Began retrofitting his cargo ship," the Admiral continued. "But he didn't just add weapons and armor. He did something no rational being would consider. He began incorporating technology from every species he encountered." A new set of schematics appeared, showing the Indomitable's internal structure. It was a nightmare of incompatible systems somehow working in harmony. Energy conduits ran alongside human electrical systems. Hive mind processing nodes connected to crystal matrices. Quantum cores from a dozen different civilizations powered weapons that existed only in theoretical physics textbooks. "How is this possible?" demanded General of the Confederacy. His massive, rock-like form shifted uneasily. "These systems should tear each other apart. The power requirements alone would overload any ship." "That's what makes humans so dangerous," Admiral replied. "They don't follow the rules. When our engineers told us it was impossible to integrate gravitational manipulators with plasma systems, humans simply did it anyway. They don't understand the word impossible." The footage shifted to show the Indomitable in action against a hegemony patrol. Where other species would have used established tactics and proven strategies, the humans improvised. They used their gravitational manipulators to throw asteroids at enemy ships. They redirected plasma discharges through crystalline focusing arrays to create weapons that cut through shields like they weren't there. But surely this is an isolated incident, Ambassador suggested hopefully. One rogue captain with a stolen ship cannot threaten the established order of the galaxy. Admiral's expression grew even grimmer. That's what I hoped as well, so I sent a task force to investigate human space more thoroughly. He paused, his throat sac pulsing with nervous energy. What we found was not one ship, but an entire fleet of impossibilities. New footage showed human vessels of every conceivable design, former cargo haulers bristling with weapons, converted mining ships that moved like fighters despite their massive size. Even human civilian vessels had been modified with technologies that shouldn't work together but somehow did. They call themselves the Free Fleet, the Admiral explained. Led by Captain and other humans who refused to submit to hegemony demands, they've been growing in numbers and strength, absorbing technology from every encounter. The implications hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. The galaxy's established order depended on technological superiority and the understanding that certain species remained in their designated roles. Humans were supposed to be minor players, confined to their small corner of space. "How many ships do they have?" asked Hive Queen, her compound eyes reflecting the holographic displays. "Our latest intelligence suggests over 200 vessels," Admiral replied. "And that number grows daily. Humans from across their space are joining this fleet, bringing whatever ships and technology they can find." "Then we crush them," declared General. "The combined fleet has over 10,000 vessels. We overwhelm them with superior numbers." "With respect, General," the Admiral said carefully, "that might not be as simple as it sounds. The humans don't fight like any species we've encountered. They adapt, improvise, and use tactics that violate every principle of civilized warfare." The hologram showed footage of human vessels ramming enemy ships after their weapons were disabled. It showed modified cargo containers being launched like missiles, filled with whatever explosives the humans could manufacture. It showed human fighters using atmospheric reentry burns as weapons, diving through planetary atmospheres to strike at surface targets. "They fight like they have nothing to lose," Admiral continued. "Because from their perspective, they don't. The hegemony threatened their families, their homes, their very existence, so they decided to fight back with everything they had." Ambassador's crystalline form dimmed with worry. "What are you suggesting, Admiral, that we negotiate with these primitives?" "I'm suggesting that we may have underestimated them," he replied. "The Indomitable alone has destroyed over 40 vessels from various species. The Free Fleet as a whole has made entire star systems avoid human space entirely." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The galactic order that had existed was being challenged by a species that had been dismissed as irrelevant. Worse, they were winning through sheer audacity and refusal to accept limitations. "There's something else," Admiral added reluctantly. "Our analysts believe the humans are learning. Every engagement teaches them something new about our technologies, our tactics, our weaknesses. They're adapting faster than we can respond." General's rocky exterior cracked slightly as he processed this information. "You're saying they're using our own encounters against us?" "Exactly. The Indomitable now carries energy shields based on mineral matrices, weapons derived from hive mind targeting systems, and propulsion technology that combines elements from every major space-faring species. They're creating something entirely new." The footage showed the Indomitable engaging a hegemony battle cruiser 3 times its size. Instead of fleeing or attempting conventional tactics, the human ship did something unprecedented. It transmitted a message to the enemy vessel. Captain's voice filled the chamber through the universal translator. "This is Captain of the Free Fleet vessel Indomitable. You have entered human space with hostile intent. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The hegemony commander's response was predictable. "Primitive humans cannot threaten the glory of the hegemony. Surrender your vessel or be destroyed." What followed was a master class in unconventional warfare. The Indomitable didn't engage in a traditional ship-to-ship battle. Instead, it launched dozens of modified cargo pods that appeared to be escape vessels. The hegemony ship ignored them, focusing on the main target. The cargo pods revealed themselves to be drone vessels, each one carrying a different experimental weapon system. Some deployed gravitational nets that dragged the enemy ship off course. Others released swarms of self-replicating repair that began converting the hegemony vessel's hull into raw materials. By the time the hegemony commander realized what was happening, his ship was being systematically dismantled from the outside, while human boarding parties cut through the weakened hull. The battle lasted less than 20 minutes. They don't just defeat their enemies, Admiral explained. They absorb everything useful and incorporate it into their fleet. Every victory makes them stronger. The assembled delegates sat in stunned silence. The footage showed human engineers working alongside alien prisoners who had joined the Free Fleet voluntarily. Former enemies were sharing technical knowledge, creating hybrid technologies that shouldn't exist. "How is this possible?" whispered Ambassador. "Species have been trying to integrate different technologies for thousands of years. The fundamental incompatibilities." "Humans don't see incompatibilities," the Admiral replied. "They see challenges to overcome. When our scientists say something is impossible, humans ask why, and then figure out a way around the problem." The implications were staggering. If humans could successfully integrate technologies from multiple species, they would eventually possess capabilities that exceeded any individual civilization. They were creating a technological synthesis that had never been achieved before. "We need to understand their methods," declared Hive Queen. "Send a diplomatic mission, offer to study their techniques in exchange for—" "There have been 3 diplomatic attempts," Admiral interrupted. "The first 2 ships were politely but firmly turned away. The third was allowed to dock with a human space station." "And," prompted General. "The diplomatic team spent 6 months on the station and returned with reports that border on the impossible. Humans don't have a centralized command structure like other species. They operate on something they call democratic consensus, where individuals can disagree with authority figures and still contribute to the overall effort. This concept was alien to most galactic civilizations, which operated on strict hierarchies based on genetics, achievement, or mental capacity. The idea that lower-ranking individuals could challenge their superiors and potentially change operational parameters was revolutionary. But more disturbing was what our diplomats observed about human psychology, the Admiral continued. Humans possess what they call adaptability and innovation. When faced with a problem, they don't just apply existing solutions, they create new ones. The hologram showed human engineers working on a captured plasma cannon. Instead of simply copying the design, they were modifying it, combining it with human projectile technology to create something entirely new. The result was a weapon that fired superheated metal projectiles wrapped in plasma fields. "They're not just using our technology," the Admiral explained. "They're improving it." The chamber erupted in heated discussion. Representatives from various species argued about the implications, the threats, and the opportunities presented by human technological adaptation. Some called for immediate military action, while others suggested attempting to study human methods. Admiral raised his hand for silence. "There's one more thing you need to know. Captain has sent a message to the Galactic Council." A new holographic figure appeared, Captain standing on what appeared to be the bridge of an even larger vessel than the Indomitable. Behind him, the bridge crew was a mixture of humans and aliens working in apparent harmony. "Greetings to the Galactic Council," began, his voice calm but carrying an undertone of steel. "I am Captain, speaking on behalf of the Free Fleet and the independent human colonies. We understand that our recent activities have caused concern among the established galactic powers." The figure paused, and even through the hologram, his presence seemed to fill the chamber. "Let me be clear, we seek no conflict with peaceful species, but we will defend ourselves against any threat to human life or freedom. The hegemony has learned this lesson. Others need not repeat their mistakes." The message continued with a formal declaration that human space was now under the protection of the Free Fleet. Any attempt at conquest or subjugation would be met with force. But the message also extended an offer of peaceful cooperation and technological exchange. "We offer friendship to those who approach us in good faith," concluded. "But to those who come as conquerors, know this: humanity will not yield. We have learned much from our encounters with galactic civilization. We hope you can learn from your encounters with us." The hologram faded, leaving the chamber in tense silence. "How many ships does he have now?" asked Ambassador quietly. Admiral's throat sac pulsed rapidly. "Our latest intelligence estimates over 500 vessels, with more joining daily, and they're no longer just modified civilian ships. They're building new vessels from scratch, incorporating everything they've learned." The implications were clear. Humanity had evolved from a minor spacefaring species to a significant galactic power in less than 5 years. They had done so not through conquest or technological superiority, but through adaptation and determination. "What do you recommend, Admiral?" asked General. "I recommend we take Captain's offer seriously," he replied. "Humans have proven they can't be easily conquered or intimidated, but they've also shown they're willing to cooperate with those who approach them honestly." "You're suggesting we negotiate with primitives who threaten the galactic order," Ambassador protested. "I'm suggesting we acknowledge a new reality," Admiral replied firmly. "Humans are no longer primitive. They're becoming something we've never encountered before, a species that can successfully integrate and improve upon technologies from multiple civilizations." The debate that followed would determine the course of galactic history. Some species would choose cooperation, others would choose confrontation. But one thing was certain: the age of human irrelevance was over. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain watched the stars through the main. His ship had grown again, incorporating new technologies and capabilities with each encounter. The crew was a mixture of humans and aliens who had chosen to join the Free Fleet's cause. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Sarah Martinez from the communications station, "we're receiving transmissions from human colonies across the sector. They're requesting Free Fleet protection." "And from the border worlds," added Chief Engineer, a reptilian humanoid whose people had joined the fleet after witnessing human engineering capabilities. "They're offering technological exchanges for mutual defense agreements." Nodded slowly. The Free Fleet had grown beyond his original vision of protecting human settlements. They were becoming something larger, a force for independence and cooperation in a galaxy dominated by rigid hierarchies and territorial empires. "Set course for the Tau system," he ordered. "It's time to show the galaxy what humans can really accomplish when we work together." As the Indomitable engaged its hybrid propulsion system, reality seemed to bend around the vessel. The combination of human determination, alien technology, and pure innovative spirit had created something unprecedented in galactic history. The Free Fleet was no longer just defending human space. They were offering an alternative to the established order, a new way of thinking about cooperation and progress among the stars. And in the depths of space, other species were beginning to take notice. 3 months after the Galactic Council meeting, the galaxy had split into distinct factions. The hegemony, bloodied but not beaten, had allied with several traditionalist species who viewed human expansion as a threat to natural order. The Empire, the Confederacy, and half a dozen smaller powers had formed what they called the Stability Coalition. On the other side, an unlikely alliance had emerged around the Free Fleet. The Federation, several independent systems, and even some rebel factions from hegemony space had begun requesting human protection and technological cooperation. Captain stood in the command center of the Prometheus, the Free Fleet's and largest vessel. Unlike the jury-rigged Indomitable, this ship had been built from the ground up using integrated technologies. Its hull incorporated gravitational stabilizers, energy conduits, and crystal processing matrices, all held together by human engineering principles that emphasized adaptability over perfection. "Captain," reported Commander Sarah Martinez, now his executive officer, "long-range sensors are detecting a massive fleet movement. The Stability Coalition is assembling near the Rigel system." Studied the tactical display. Over 3,000 vessels from a dozen different species were converging on what had traditionally been neutral space. The message was clear. The coalition intended to end the human threat once and for all. "How many ships do we have available?" asked. 843 vessels of various configurations," replied Chief Tactical Officer. "But our intelligence suggests the coalition fleet includes several dreadnought-class vessels. The odds are heavily against us in a direct confrontation." Smiled grimly. Since when have humans worried about odds? The Free Fleet had grown beyond anyone's expectations, but not just in numbers. Each ship was now a unique fusion of technologies and ideas. Human creativity had found ways to make incompatible systems work together, creating vessels that conventional understanding of space warfare. "Signal all Free Fleet vessels," ordered. "We're not running from this fight, but we're not fighting it the way they expect either." What the Coalition didn't understand was how fundamentally human warfare had evolved. Where other species relied on established doctrines and proven strategies, humans had developed something entirely new: collaborative tactical innovation. "Open a channel to all Free Fleet commanders," commanded. "It's time for a war council." Within hours, holographic figures filled the Prometheus command center. Captain of the Defiance, a converted research vessel now armed with experimental weapons. Commander of the Aurora, a former luxury liner transformed into a mobile shipyard. Captain of the Determination, a purpose-built frigate that moved like a fighter despite its size. But most significantly, alien commanders who had joined the Free Fleet also participated. Captain, a former hegemony officer whose people had been conquered decades ago. Commander, a defector who had brought advanced shield technology. Even Hive, representing several ships whose collective intelligence provided tactical advantages no individual commander could match. "The Coalition expects us to meet them in traditional battle formation," began. "Massive ships exchanging fire at long range until one side breaks. That's not how we fight." Captain leaned forward in her holographic projection. "What are you proposing?" "We use every advantage we've developed," replied. "Mobility, adaptability, and the one thing they can't counter, unpredictability." The plan that emerged from the War Council was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Instead of a single massive engagement, the Free Fleet would split into dozens of small task forces, each with different objectives and capabilities. Some groups would focus on disrupting Coalition supply lines. Others would target command vessels. Still others would engage in what humans called guerrilla warfare, hit-and-run attacks designed to confuse and demoralize the enemy. "Remember," concluded the briefing, "we're not just fighting for human independence anymore. We're fighting for the right of all species to determine their own destiny." The Coalition fleet arrived at Rigel expecting to find the Free Fleet waiting in defensive formation. Instead, they found empty space and a single message beacon. Admiral, now commanding the Coalition forces, accessed the message with growing dread. Captain's image appeared, but he was no longer on the bridge of a single ship. Behind him stretched what appeared to be a massive mobile base, clearly assembled from multiple vessels working in coordination. "Admiral and Coalition forces," began, "you've come here to destroy what you see as a threat to galactic order, but you've fundamentally misunderstood what we represent." The message beacon showed footage of Free Fleet vessels working alongside ships from a dozen different species. Humans and aliens collaborated as equals, sharing knowledge and resources in ways the rigid Coalition hierarchy couldn't comprehend. "We don't seek to conquer or destroy," continued. "We seek to build something new, a galaxy where cooperation matters more than domination, where innovation trumps tradition." Admiral's throat sac pulsed with anger. "Locate the source of this transmission and destroy it." But as Coalition sensors swept the system, they found something that challenged their understanding of space warfare. The Free Fleet wasn't hiding, they were everywhere. Small groups of ships moved through the asteroid fields, using gravitational manipulation to mask their signatures. Others had somehow concealed themselves in the system's gas giant, protected by energy fields that shouldn't have been possible. "Sir," reported the Coalition's chief sensor operator, "I'm detecting over 400 individual contacts, but they're all moving independently. No central formation, no command structure we can identify." "Impossible," Admiral hissed. "No fleet can coordinate without central command." That's when the attacks began. Free Fleet vessels emerged from concealment throughout the system, but they didn't charge directly at the Coalition fleet. Instead, they moved like a swarm, each ship taking advantage of local conditions and opportunities. A group of modified mining vessels emerged from the asteroid belt, using gravitational slings to launch massive rocks at Coalition ships. The projectiles moved too slowly to threaten maneuverable vessels, but they forced the enemy fleet to break formation. Human fighters, their engines modified with crystal technology, moved at speeds that conventional physics. They didn't engage in traditional dogfighting, but instead deployed clouds of self-replicating that began interfering with coalition sensors and communications. Most disturbing of all, several Free Fleet vessels seemed to be working in perfect coordination despite having no visible command structure. They moved like a school of fish, responding to threats and opportunities with collective intelligence that no individual commander could achieve. "How are they coordinating their attacks?" demanded Admiral. His tactical officer, a crystalline, shimmered with confusion. "Sir, they appear to be using a combination of technologies we've never seen before. Human neural interfaces connected to hive mind processing nodes, integrated with crystal matrices. They're sharing information instantaneously across the entire fleet." The implications were staggering. The Free Fleet had essentially created a collective intelligence that maintained individual creativity. Each captain could make independent decisions while sharing knowledge with the entire force. A coalition battlecruiser suddenly lurched as its engines failed. Clouds had infiltrated its power systems, not to destroy them, but to redirect energy to the ship's communications array. The vessel began broadcasting Free Fleet propaganda to other coalition ships, spreading messages about cooperation and freedom. "Sir," reported the communications officer, 17 vessels are requesting to withdraw from combat. Their crews are questioning the mission. Admiral realized with growing horror that the humans weren't just fighting a military battle. They were fighting for hearts and minds, using captured vessels to broadcast alternative viewpoints directly to coalition crews. "All ships ignore the propaganda and focus fire on enemy vessels," he ordered. But the Free Fleet refused to cooperate with traditional tactics. When coalition ships attempted to form battle lines, human vessels simply vanished into the asteroid field or behind planetary shields. When the coalition pursued, they found themselves scattered and vulnerable to hit-and-run attacks. The Indomitable emerged from behind the system's star, having somehow survived transit through its corona. The ship's hull glowed with residual energy, but its weapons systems were fully operational and enhanced by stellar radiation. "This is Captain to all coalition forces," came the transmission. "You've seen what we can accomplish when necessity demands it, but this doesn't have to continue." The Indomitable didn't attack the coalition fleet. Instead, it positioned itself between the opposing forces and began broadcasting on all frequencies. "Every species in this system has something valuable to contribute," continued. "Your technologies, your knowledge, your perspectives, but only if we work together instead of trying to dominate each other." Admiral ordered his flagship to target the Indomitable, but something unprecedented happened. Several coalition vessels refused the order. Their crews, influenced by Free Fleet broadcasts and seeing evidence of successful cooperation, began questioning their commander's authority. "Sir," reported the tactical officer, "the heavy cruiser Stone Hammer is requesting permission to negotiate with the humans." Admiral snapped, "All ships will engage enemy targets immediately." But the coalition fleet was beginning to fracture. Ships that had come to destroy human expansion found themselves facing evidence of successful cooperation between species. The Free Fleet's integration of different technologies wasn't just militarily effective. It was proof that the galaxy's rigid hierarchies weren't necessary. The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. It wasn't a single massive engagement, but hundreds of smaller conflicts, negotiations, and technological demonstrations. Some coalition ships fought to the end, but others began switching sides as their crews witnessed the possibilities that human cooperation offered. Captain found himself in personal combat with Admiral when the commander led a boarding action against the Indomitable. The two leaders faced each other in the ship's main corridor, surrounded by evidence of successful technological integration. "You've destroyed the natural order of the galaxy," Admiral hissed, his energy weapon trained on his chest. "We've offered an alternative to it," replied calmly. "Your own crew is questioning orders for the first time in their lives. Is that destruction or evolution?" The Admiral's throat sac pulsed with conflict. Around them, Marines stood alongside human security personnel, weapons lowered as they listened to the debate between their commanders. "The galaxy has always been ruled by the strong," Admiral insisted. "Species find their proper place in the hierarchy. That is the natural way." "What if there's a better way?" asked. "What if cooperation achieves more than domination?" The question hung in the air as both leaders considered the evidence surrounding them. The Indomitable itself was proof that seemingly incompatible systems could work together. The mixed crews throughout the Free Fleet demonstrated that different species could collaborate as equals. Admiral Sweppen wavered as doubt crept into his mind. His entire worldview was based on the assumption that conflict and hierarchy were natural and necessary. But the humans had proven that assumption wrong. "Stand down, Admiral," said quietly. "Your people don't have to die for an idea that isn't working anymore." Around them, the sounds of battle were already fading as more coalition ships ceased hostilities. The Free Fleet's unconventional tactics had achieved something impossible. They had won a battle by convincing their enemies to stop fighting. Admiral slowly lowered his weapon. "What happens now?" "Now we figure out how to build something better together," replied. "Your people have technologies and knowledge that could benefit everyone, but only if you're willing to share them as partners instead of forcing them on others." The aftermath of the Battle of Rigel sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Over half the coalition fleet had either joined the Free Fleet or declared neutrality. The rigid alliance structure that had dominated galactic politics began to fracture as individual species questioned their roles in the established order. But the most significant change was philosophical. The humans had proven that cooperation could achieve more than competition, that diversity was a strength rather than a weakness, and that innovation mattered more than tradition. Captain stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, now expanded again with new technologies and crew members from dozens of species. The Free Fleet had grown to over 1,500 vessels, but more importantly, it had become a symbol of possibility. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Martinez, "we're receiving requests for protection and alliance from systems across the galaxy. Even some former hegemony core worlds are asking for our help." Nodded slowly. The Free Fleet had evolved beyond its original mission of protecting human settlements. It had become something larger, a force for change in a galaxy that had forgotten how to change. "Signal all Free Fleet commanders," he ordered. "It's time to discuss our next steps." As holographic figures filled the bridge for another war council, reflected on how far they had come. What had started as a desperate attempt to protect human families had become a galactic revolution based on cooperation and innovation. But he knew the real challenge was just beginning. Building something new was always harder than tearing down something old. The Free Fleet would need to prove that their principles could work on a galactic scale, that cooperation could be maintained even as their alliance grew larger and more complex. "The galaxy is changing," he announced to the assembled commanders. "The question is whether we can change with it while staying true to what brought us together." The War Council that followed would determine whether the Free Fleet could evolve from a military alliance into something unprecedented. A truly cooperative galactic civilization based on mutual respect and shared innovation. Outside the viewports, stars that had once been separated by rigid territorial boundaries now represented possibilities for exploration and cooperation. The age of human terror was ending, but the age of human influence was just beginning. 5 years after the Battle of Rigel, the galaxy bore little resemblance to its former self. The rigid territorial boundaries that had defined civilization had given way to a complex network of cooperative agreements and technological exchanges. The Free Fleet had evolved from a military organization into something unprecedented, the Galactic Cooperative Alliance. Captain, now bearing the title of first speaker for the Alliance, stood in the observation deck of New Horizon, a vessel that every previous understanding of starship design. The ship wasn't built according to any single species' architectural principles, but represented a true fusion of galactic knowledge. Its hull curved in ways that pleased aesthetic sensibilities while incorporating gravitational technology and energy systems, all held together by human engineering that emphasized function over form. "First speaker," called Commander Martinez, approaching with a data pad in hand. "The Engineering Council has completed their analysis of the Andromeda probe data." Accepted the pad, his weathered features creasing into a smile as he reviewed the information. The probe, launched 18 months earlier, had been humanity's first serious attempt at intergalactic exploration. What it had found all expectations. 7 distinct civilizations, he murmured, reading the data. all apparently isolated from each other, all following development patterns similar to our own galaxy before the Alliance. The team believes they're seeing parallel evolution of social structures, Martinez reported. Rigid hierarchies, territorial conflicts, technological stagnation due to competitive rather than cooperative development. Nodded thoughtfully. The Alliance had learned much about the relationship between cooperation and innovation over the past 5 years. Species that had remained unchanged for thousands of years had achieved more technological advancement in half a decade of collaboration than in all their previous history combined. Any signs of spacefaring capability? He asked. 3 of the civilizations appear to have achieved interstellar travel, Martinez replied. But they're following the same pattern we saw here, establishing territorial empires, suppressing innovation that might threaten established power structures. The implications were staggering. If the Andromeda data was accurate, the Alliance represented something truly unique in the known universe. A civilization that had learned to grow through cooperation rather than conquest. Schedule a full Alliance Council meeting, ordered. This discovery changes everything. Within hours, representatives from over 200 species gathered in the New Horizons Council chamber. Unlike the rigid hierarchies of the old Galactic Council, Alliance meetings operated on principles that would have seemed anarchic to traditional civilizations. Anyone could speak. Ideas were evaluated on merit rather than the species of origin, and consensus was built through debate and compromise rather than intimidation. Admiral, now serving as Alliance military coordinator, was among the first to address the discovery. His transformation from enemy commander to cooperative ally had become a symbol of the Alliance's ability to change former adversaries into partners. The Andromeda civilizations represent both an opportunity and a challenge, he began, his serpentine form coiled with thoughtful energy. If we approach them as the old galactic powers would have, we risk recreating the same conflicts that plagued our own galaxy. Captain, representing the Liberation Fleet, former rebels from various oppressive regimes, raised a clawed hand. But we also can't ignore the suffering that rigid hierarchies cause. My people endured centuries of oppression before the Alliance offered an alternative. The debate that followed the Alliance's greatest strength and greatest challenge. How could they spread the benefits of cooperation without becoming the very thing they had originally fought against, a dominant power imposing its will on others? We have to remember how this all started, interjected when the debate grew heated. None of us chose cooperation because it was forced on us. We chose it because we saw it worked better than the alternatives. Hive Queen, now representing the collective consciousness faction within the Alliance, clicked her mandibles in agreement. The Free Fleet succeeded because it offered something better, not because it demanded submission. The Andromeda civilizations must be given the same choice. What emerged from the Council meeting was a plan unlike anything attempted in galactic history. The Alliance would send not a military expedition or diplomatic mission, but a demonstration fleet, ships and crew members who would simply exist in Andromeda space as living proof that cooperative civilization was possible. We'll be walking advertisements for a better way of life, explained to the assembled representatives. Not trying to conquer or convert, just showing what's possible when different species work together. The demonstration fleet would consist of 12 vessels, each representing a different aspect of Alliance society. The New Horizon would serve as the flagship, its hybrid crew and integrated technologies showcasing the benefits of cooperation. Other ships would demonstrate Alliance education systems, medical advances, artistic collaboration, and scientific research methods. Most importantly, the fleet would include the Indomitable, now serving as a mobile museum and symbol of how far the Alliance had evolved. The ship that had once struck terror into enemy fleets now represented the possibility of transformation and growth. Preparations for the Andromeda mission took nearly 2 years. Unlike traditional expeditions focused on conquest or exploration, this mission required careful consideration of how to demonstrate Alliance principles without appearing threatening or superior. Found himself aboard the Indomitable more often during the preparation period, walking corridors that had once echoed with the sounds of desperate combat. The ship had been extensively modified over the years, but traces of its violent origins remained visible beneath layers of peaceful technological integration. Nostalgic, Captain? Asked Chief Engineer, joining in the observation lounge where so many crucial decisions had been made. Reflective, replied. This ship has seen us at our worst and our best, from desperate refugees fighting for survival to explorers heading toward unknown galaxies. His reptilian features shifted into what humans had learned was his species' equivalent of a smile. My people have a saying, the tree that bends in the storm grows stronger than the one that stands rigid. Humans taught the galaxy how to bend. The Andromeda fleet finally departed on a cold morning in human space, carrying with them the hopes and dreams of billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. The journey would take several months even with the Alliance's most advanced propulsion systems, giving the crew time to prepare for whatever they might encounter. Captain spent much of the journey in discussion with his diverse crew, learning about their perspectives on the mission and the Alliance itself. What he discovered was both encouraging and sobering. The old ways die hard, admitted Lieutenant Commander, a former hegemony officer who now served as the New Horizons diplomatic coordinator. Even within the Alliance, there are species that still struggle with the concept of equality. They cooperate because it's beneficial, not because they truly believe in it. But that's still progress, countered Dr. Sarah, the ship's chief and former mining engineer. Behavior change often precedes belief change. As long as they keep cooperating, their descendants will grow up thinking it's normal. The philosophical debates that filled the journey to Andromeda reflected the complexity of what the Alliance had become. It wasn't a perfect society. No civilization could be, but it was a growing one, constantly adapting and improving through the contributions of its diverse membership. When the Alliance fleet emerged from hyperspace in the Andromeda galaxy, they found themselves in a region of space that seemed eerily familiar yet fundamentally different. The star patterns were alien, but the energy signatures of the local civilizations followed predictable patterns of territorial expansion and technological militarization. Three major powers in this sector, reported Commander Martinez from the sensor station. The hegemonic Imperium, the crystalline sovereignty, and something called the Machine Collective. They appear to be in a state of perpetual low-level conflict over resource rights. Studied the tactical display, noting the defensive formations and territorial boundaries that divided the region into rigid zones of control. It was like looking at the galaxy's past, before the Alliance had shown that cooperation was possible. Any signs that they've detected our arrival? He asked. Passive sensors only, Martinez replied. We're being scanned, but no hostile moves yet. They seem confused by our ship configurations. That confusion was understandable. Alliance vessels didn't fit into any traditional category. They were clearly advanced, but carried no obvious weapons. They moved in loose formation rather than rigid battle lines. Most puzzling of all, they made no attempt to claim territory or establish defensive positions. The first contact came 3 days later when a patrol fleet from the hegemonic Imperium approached the Alliance vessels. The encounter would become legendary in both galaxies as an example of how different approaches to diplomacy could shape the course of history. Unknown vessels, came the transmission in what the Alliance's linguistic computers identified as a hierarchical command structure. You have entered Imperium space without authorization. Identify yourselves and state your intentions. Personally responded from the bridge of the New Horizon, his image transmitted clearly to the Imperium ships. Behind him, the bridge crew's diversity was immediately apparent, humans, and half a dozen other species working in obvious cooperation. Greetings, began, his voice carrying the calm confidence that had become his trademark. I am first speaker of the Galactic Cooperative Alliance. We come from another galaxy in peace, seeking only to share knowledge and demonstrate the possibilities of cooperative civilization. The silence that followed spoke volumes about how alien this concept was to Andromeda civilizations. In a galaxy where first contact typically involved threats, demands, or conquest attempts, the idea of visitors who wanted nothing more than to share knowledge was revolutionary. Cooperative Alliance, came the eventual response from what appeared to be the Imperium commander. You speak of cooperation between inferior and superior species. How is such a thing possible? There are no inferior or superior species in the Alliance, replied patiently. Only different capabilities and perspectives that become stronger when combined. What followed was a demonstration that would reshape Andromeda civilization. The Alliance fleet didn't defend against Imperium probes or respond with military posturing. Instead, they opened their communications channels, sharing technical specifications, cultural databases, and historical records that documented the transformation of their own galaxy. The Imperium commander, Admiral Oss, found himself confronting evidence that challenged everything his civilization believed about power, hierarchy, and progress. The Alliance ships carried technologies that exceeded anything in Andromeda, but they weren't using them as weapons or tools of domination. "This cannot be real," Admiral Oss transmitted after reviewing several hours of Alliance historical data. "No civilization achieves advancement through cooperation with inferior species." "We invite you to examine the evidence," responded. "Send representatives to our ships. See for yourself how our society operates." The exchange that followed was unprecedented in Andromeda history. Imperium officers boarded Alliance vessels not as conquerors or prisoners, but as students and observers. What they found their understanding of how civilization worked. Commander, now serving as cultural liaison on the New Horizon, guided a group of Imperium officers through the ship's research laboratories. The visitors watched in amazement as scientists from dozens of species collaborated on projects that none could have achieved alone. "This researcher," explained, indicating a crystalline being working at a quantum physics station, "comes from a species that naturally perceives 11 dimensions. This one," she gestured to a hive-mind drone, "can process information at rates that exceed our computers. And this human," she indicated Doctor, "has the ability to synthesize their work into practical applications." "But who commands them?" asked Captain, one of the Imperium observers. "How do you maintain order without hierarchy?" "They command themselves," replied. "Each contributes according to their abilities and interests. Order emerges from cooperation, not control." Similar conversations occurred throughout the Alliance fleet, as Andromeda visitors struggled to comprehend a civilization that had evolved beyond their understanding of power dynamics. Most shocking of all was the discovery that many Alliance species had once been enemies of each other. Admiral Oss found himself in extended conversation with Admiral, comparing their experiences as military commanders in hierarchical societies. "How do you maintain discipline without the threat of punishment?" Oss asked. "We replace the threat of punishment with the promise of contribution," replied. "When individuals know their efforts matter and their voices are heard, they choose to participate rather than being forced to comply." The transformation that followed was gradual but undeniable. Imperium officers who had boarded Alliance vessels as skeptical observers returned as advocates for change. They carried with them not conquest plans or stolen technologies, but ideas about different ways of organizing society. Within months, similar transformations were occurring throughout the region as other Andromeda civilizations made contact with the Alliance fleet. The crystalline sovereignty discovered that their rigid caste system was limiting their potential for growth. The Machine Collective learned that individual creativity could enhance rather than threaten collective efficiency. But the most significant change occurred within the species themselves. Individuals who had never questioned their place in hierarchical societies began to imagine alternatives. Soldiers asked why they were fighting. Scientists wondered what they could achieve with unrestricted collaboration. Citizens started demanding explanations for policies they had always accepted without question. Found himself at the center of a transformation that exceeded even his most optimistic expectations. The Andromeda civilizations weren't just adopting Alliance technologies or government structures. They were evolving their entire approach to existence. "We've started something that we can't control," he confided to Martinez during one of their regular evening discussions in the New Horizons observation lounge. "Is that necessarily bad?" she asked. "The Alliance itself has evolved far beyond what any of us originally envisioned." Considered the question as he watched ships from multiple Andromeda civilizations working together to construct a joint research station. Former enemies were sharing resources and knowledge, following principles they had learned from Alliance example rather than Alliance coercion. "I suppose the real test of our principles is whether they can survive without us," he mused. "Whether the ideas are strong enough to grow on their own." The answer came 2 years later when the Alliance fleet prepared to return to their home galaxy. What they left behind was not a collection of conquest or satellite states, but a network of independent civilizations that had chosen cooperation over conflict. The Andromeda Cooperative Council, established by local species using alliance principles but adapted to their unique circumstances, had already begun expanding beyond the initial contact region. Other civilizations throughout the galaxy were requesting information about cooperative government structures and integrated technologies. Most significantly, the Andromeda civilizations had begun developing innovations that exceeded even Alliance achievements. The combination of their fresh perspectives with Alliance principles was producing breakthroughs that neither galaxy could have achieved alone. "They're not copying us," observed as he reviewed reports of Andromeda developments. "They're using our example as a starting point for their own evolution." The return journey to their home galaxy was filled with reflection and planning. The Alliance had proven that their principles could transcend galactic boundaries, but they had also learned that successful cooperation required constant adaptation and renewal. "What now?" asked Admiral during one of the mission's final briefings. "We've shown that our way works in 2 galaxies. Do we actively seek out others?" "We continue to grow and improve," replied. "We share what we've learned with anyone interested in learning. But most importantly, we remember that the moment we start thinking we have all the answers is the moment we stop being the Alliance." As the New Horizon approached familiar star patterns, found himself on the bridge of the Indomitable one final time. The ship that had begun as a desperate refugee vessel and evolved into a symbol of transformation was being retired to serve as a monument and museum. The bridge was exactly as he remembered it from those first desperate days when human survival had seemed impossible. But the galaxy they were returning to bore no resemblance to the one they had fled from. The rigid hierarchies, territorial conflicts, and technological stagnation that had defined galactic civilization had given way to something unprecedented. A universe where diversity was celebrated, cooperation was normal, and innovation flourished. Standing in the command chair where he had made the decision to fight impossible odds, reflected on the journey that had transformed a cargo hauler into the catalyst for galactic revolution. It hadn't been human superiority that changed the universe. It had been human stubbornness in refusing to accept that things couldn't be better. "The galaxy is calling, Captain," announced Lieutenant Martinez from the communications station. "The Alliance Council is requesting your presence for a full mission briefing." Smiled as he took one last look around the bridge that had seen humanity's transition from refugee to revolutionary to explorer. The age of human terror was long past, but the age of human possibility was just beginning. "Tell them we're coming home," he said, "and that we have stories to share." As the Alliance fleet entered their home galaxy space, they were greeted by vessels representing hundreds of species, all flying the cooperative banner that had replaced the territorial flags of the old order. The transformation that had begun with one man's refusal to surrender had become a galactic revolution based on the simple principle that everyone had something valuable to contribute. The universe was vast, filled with countless civilizations waiting to discover what was possible when competition gave way to cooperation. And somewhere in the depths of space, new voices were already asking the question that had started it all: what if there's a better way? The human warship that had shattered fleets had become something far more powerful, an idea that could shatter the limitations of what civilizations thought possible. And that idea was spreading across the universe, carried by beings who had learned that terror could become hope, that enemies could become allies, and that the greatest victories came not from destroying others, but from helping them become more than they had ever imagined possible.